good morning and welcome all the people here in attendance. Today, we will be reviewing H.R. 2666, the Internet Poker Freedom Act, sponsored by my colleague on the committee, Mr. Joe Barton. This legislation addresses a timely issue, the legality of online gaming, specifically pertaining to Internet poker. Today's hearing title aptly describes why we are here, and I'm very interested in the state of online gaming in the United States and think the issue is ripe for Congress to conduct oversight of this matter. Several different factors have led to an environment in the U.S. where the status of online gaming is murky at best. One, a recent DOJ opinion that reinterpreted the Wire Act opened the door for online gaming, except for sports betting, to be hosted on an intrastate basis. This has led to a patchwork of state laws, with 7 states moving to outlaw gaming, while others have authorized it in different forms, the most expansive being so far New Jersey, which has authorized multiple forms of Internet gambling, and of course, Nevada is moving in that same direction. In addition to the patchwork of state laws, a multinational patchwork exists as well. According to a white paper by the American Gaming Association, over 85 countries have chosen to legalize Internet gaming to some extent. While the U.S. has not explicitly legalized it, our citizens still account for about 15% of the global revenues to the roughly 2,700 websites which host online gaming. This means that Americans are patronizing these offshore websites to the tune of over $1 billion a year. And as if that's not confusing enough, as we will hear today, the American gaming industry also does not seem to be in agreement on a clear path forward for the future of online gaming domestically. The issues are very concerning to me. While unfettered online gaming here in the U.S. is surely not the ideal, absent a clear mandate from Congress, we risk exposing our constituents to an environment of a race to the bottom which could present itself. It's my hope that these hearings, such as the one, will shed light on what logical steps Congress can take to address this growing dilemma. While I understand and agree that Congress should not trample on the rights of states, I believe it is critical that we gain an understanding for the integrity of the different state standards, how this affects the citizens of our other states, and what the role of the federal government should be in the future of domestic online gaming. I'm pleased to say that we'll be hearing from a balanced panel of experts today, and I stress balance because in planning this hearing, I want to make sure that we heard from as many sides of this debate and all of its nuances as possible. And I'd like to again thank all of our witnesses for being here and yield the last 2 minutes to Mr. Lance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The legal gaming industry is a multi-billion-dollar operation with significant economic impact in the state of New Jersey, which I represent here in Congress, and of course in the United States. According to the American Gaming Association, a commercial casino operator's reported revenue of $37.3 billion in 2012. In New Jersey, revenue from legal gaming in 2012 topped $3 billion. In recent years, the development of mobile technology and the Justice Department's 2011 legal interpretation of the Wire Act have opened the door for states to operate Internet gaming within their borders. In November, New Jersey became the 3rd state to operate Internet gaming, joining Nevada and Delaware. Online gaming in New Jersey allows consumers who are present within the state to have access to the same games of skill and chance that are offered in Atlantic City's casinos. Online gaming has the potential to provide much-needed revenue to Atlantic City and to the state of New Jersey's budget. A report in our largest newspaper, the Newark Star-Ledger, states that internet gambling is expected to produce hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in revenue annually. Since 1978, when gambling began in Atlantic City, the gaming industry has been an important part of New Jersey's economy, and Internet gaming has the potential to reinvigorate the state's industry and secure its financial solvency in the future. At this hearing, we will also examine legislation introduced by my friend and colleague, Representative Barton of Texas, the Internet Poker Freedom Act of 2013. This legislation would establish a program for the licensing of Internet poker by states and federally recognized Indian tribes. I look forward to examining this legislation and the hearing and testimony from the panel on the state of online gaming. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Now recognize the ranking.
Did you want to ask?
Oh, yes, thank you. Ask unanimous consent to allow Mr. Heck from the greater Las Vegas area to join us on the panel today. Hearing none, so ordered. And now recognize the gentlelady from Chicago, the ranking member of the subcommittee, for her 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I look around, I see there are no weather wimps in this room, and I welcome all of you. You know, us Midwesterners, this is nothing. We don't get it. But anyway, we're very happy that you're here to give your testimony. This is an important issue that has a significant following, and I look forward to hear from our witnesses and gaining from all of your perspectives. The issue of online gambling is incredibly complex and is certainly deserving of our attention. It also is becoming increasingly important as last month New Jersey joined Nevada and Delaware as the only states to offer real money online casino games. Most states are considering, or many states are considering similar action, possibly including my home state of Illinois. I understand that some amount of gambling is already occurring online. Establishing a stronger federal role might improve oversight, reduce illegal operations, and provide new revenues at the federal or state level. However, I do have some serious concerns about expanding online gambling. Studies show that low-income workers, minorities, retirees suffer disproportionately from problem gambling. It is important that if online wagering expands, protections are in place to prevent the exploitation of vulnerable populations. That should include limitations on using lines of credit rather than real assets to bet. The government should not be in the business of increasing the number of people struggling with gambling addiction. As a lifelong consumer advocate, I also think it's critical if federal legislation is to expand online gambling, it does so with consumer protections as a top priority. Safeguards must be in place to ensure that consumer data is well protected. That can be accomplished in part by ensuring that standards are in place to limit the unnecessary collection of consumer information. Consumers must be adequately informed of the data being collected about them and the policies regarding the handling of that data. In any legislation to expand online gambling, high standards of privacy must be maintained for those who choose to engage or not to engage in online gambling. Information about frequent bettors or those who have self-identified as problem gamblers to limit their access to online gambling must not be shared or sold without the consent of that individual. Individual consent should not be wrapped up in a complex privacy agreement, but should be clear and transparent to the user. If an expansion of online gambling is allowed, those who choose to play should also have confidence that the game they are playing is operated with integrity. Is it bots? Bots. I don't even know what that is. Bots, collusion, and other unfair practices must be kept away from any gambling websites created to maintain fairness for players. I thought maybe that's bets or bots, whatever. And again, I appreciate the varied perspectives of our witnesses, and I look forward to hearing from them today about the current state of online gambling, where we go from here, and how any future actions can address the many consumer protection concerns that I have raised. And I yield back, Mr. Chairman, and I think none. Let's see, Mr. Welch, I asked the others, are you interested in the remaining time? I spoke for him. Thank you. I yield back for all of us.
All right, Mr. Barton, you are now recognized for 5 minutes. You control the all 5 minutes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. To my good friend Jan Schakowsky, a bot is a computer program that uses artificial intelligence and pre-programmed instructions to play not just poker or games of chance, but all kinds of things on the internet, and they are not good things in my opinion. So that's what a bot is. I want to welcome some former members out in the audience, John Porter of Nevada, and former chairman of the Ag Committee from California, I think Richard Pombo is out there, and so we welcome him back to Congress. I want to tell the committee, Mr. Chairman, that God must be for this bill, because I got up this morning at 4 o'clock in Ennis, Texas, outside of Dallas, and braved icy roads and 20-degree temperatures and to get to DFW Airport, where my good friends at American Airlines left exactly on time, and God put a 200-mile-an-hour tailwind behind the plane, and I got here an hour early. So that tells me that God is for this bill. That's my opinion. Well, Mr. Chairman, I first want to thank you for holding this hearing, and Chairman Upton and Mr. Schakowsky and Mr. Waxman for agreeing to do it. I want to thank our witnesses. This is a serious issue. It has a lot of ramifications for the country. When I first got elected 30 years ago, there was no such thing as the internet. You could actually still send a telegram. And I told about flying up here on American Airlines this morning. Members of Congress still got 2 paid round-trip train tickets to their district. Okay? The world was completely different. If you wanted to make a bank deposit, you had to literally go to the bank. If you wanted to see a doctor, you had to literally go to a doctor's office. Everything had to be done in person. Well, now we have the internet and iPhones and iPads and apps and all these things. Just about the only thing you can't do anymore on the internet is play poker. And that is changing. As Mrs. Schakowsky has pointed out, lots of states are beginning to allow intrastate poker and or other games of chance. Only 2 states in the Union don't allow within their borders some form of gaming, 2 out of 50. So I think the time has come to recognize that in the internet age, we need to regulate and set a level playing field for those of us who would like to play poker online. And I want to emphasize that the Internet Poker Freedom Act, H.R. 2666, is a poker-only bill. And for my good friends on the Republican side of the aisle, it is a states' rights, user-friendly bill. It is an opt-out. We start out saying all 50 states are going to allow poker to be played, but if a state doesn't want to do it, it just takes the governor of a state to write a letter or maybe even on the back of a postcard, send it to the Secretary of Commerce, and that state will not allow internet poker within its boundaries. H.R. 2666 has been developed in openness and transparency. It is a refined product of a similar bill that I introduced in the last 2 Congresses. I think it's a good work product. I think it would work. I think it would provide fairness and all the things that several of the other members who have talked about this morning support. It's not a perfect bill, and obviously the purpose of this hearing will be to see where it needs to be improved. There are some that talk about the problems of addiction and gambling to excess. We have taken every recommendation in the bill from the advocates who want to try to prevent such bad behavior. So, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to the hearing. I do appreciate you holding it. And I will point out that in the last Congress, a similar hearing in this subcommittee was the most watched hearing of the entire Energy and Commerce Committee in terms of people watching it over the internet. So I'm sure we're going to have a lot of people watching us today.
Yeah, I think we will, and especially since we're the only hearing. But
that's a tribute to your leadership, Mr. Chairman.
Timing. But Joe, under your state's rights, I'll have to ask you at some point in time after the hearing, if it's all right, then if a governor could ban Texas Hold'em and just allow Omaha.
That we'll talk, Mr.
All right.
Chairman.
Thank you.
If that's the only problem, we gotta
Yeah, good point. All right, so our Vegas routine is now completed, and now off to business here with our witnesses here. Some of you have been here before and you know how it works. You have 5 minutes to give us your statement. There's a little light down there. Green means go, yellow means start wrapping it up, red means I'm going to start tapping the gavel and go on to the next. And then at the end of Mr. Eggert's testimony, we'll open it up to the questions, of which each member will have 5 minutes. So with that, Mr. Freeman, thank you all again for being here, and you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Terry and Ranking Member Schakowsky, members of the subcommittee. It's great to come back before the committee again. I did this several times while with the U.S. Travel Association, and appreciate the opportunity to work with you. This hearing couldn't be more timely. 3 states have already kicked off their versions of online gaming: New Jersey, Nevada, and Delaware. Demand to play is high, and your attention is critical. I'd like to start by joining the Almighty and thanking Congressman Barton for his leadership on this issue and pragmatic efforts to create a regulated gaming environment. That's certainly what we need more of. There are 3 points that I'd like to make to the committee today. The first is that the experience of the past several years has yielded one crystal clear conclusion, and that conclusion is that prohibition of online gaming has not and will not work. Until this year, online gaming, poker or otherwise, has been illegal in every corner of the country, and the Justice Department has led an aggressive crackdown on offshore operators. The result? Last year, Americans spent nearly $3 billion on illegal offshore gaming sites, constituting nearly 10% of the entire worldwide online gaming market. In other words, recent prohibition attempts have only created a thriving black market. This should come as no surprise to a country where sports betting takes place in just about everywhere, despite an ostensibly blanket government prohibition. In fact, it's fair to argue that prohibition has given shady offshore operators the best ally they could imagine. Legitimate operators, such as my members, respect the law, have licenses at stake, and stay out of the American market. Illegal operators disobey the law and often disregard their own customers. Make no mistake, online gaming is here to stay. The government cannot put the Internet back into the bottle. The question is, are we going to regulate online gaming or allow the black market to continue to thrive? My second point is that demand for online gaming will only continue to grow. The world over, the Internet is changing how we live our lives, and it's certainly changing the face of business. Some companies get on the first wave of that change and thrive in the marketplace. Other companies, like Blockbuster or Hollywood Video, for example, refuse to adapt to the needs of their customers and are left in innovation's wake. Just 2 weeks ago, in the very first week that online gaming was offered legally in New Jersey, more than 50,000 people signed up. Last week, Juniper Research estimated that 100 million people will conduct gambling on mobile devices by 2018. The demand is extraordinary and certainly not going away. With this demand and the blossoming black market, my final point is that there is an important role for the federal government. Congress should provide a uniform set of protections for consumers while respecting states' rights to choose what is in their best interest. The AGA supports a strong regulatory regime that insists on player identification, age verification, transparent records of all transactions, geolocation, aggressive tools for responsible gaming, and help for those with gambling disorders. New technologies are proven to detect the vulnerable and those who may wish to do us harm. And it is worth noting that as an industry, we are completely aligned on the need to protect vulnerable populations, even as we may disagree on the best means of doing so. The United Kingdom, France, Italy, Spain, Denmark, Belgium, Sweden, Finland, Australia, Japan, Hong Kong, and Canada, just to name a few, have all considered the serious issues brought before you today, and all have chosen to pursue a regulated market. Consumers are protected, national security concerns are addressed, and economic development is realized. In conclusion, let me say that Americans will always gamble, offline, online, or in whatever form is invented in the coming years. And as countless studies show, more than 95% will do so in a responsible manner. We believe the best protection for consumers and for our country is strong and effective regulation that respects states' rights. We look forward to working with you and others in Congress to build the type of regulatory framework that is important here. Thank you for inviting me, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Andy Aboud, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Congressman Terry, Madam Ranking Member. I have to say it's an honor for me. This is my first time testifying before Congress, and I have the unique opportunity to testify before two hometown congressmen, one being my Husker friend here, Congressman Lee Terry, and my congressman in Las Vegas, Congressman Joe Heck. Thank you for allowing us to be here today. I have 3 simple points as well. I'm the Senior Vice President for the Las Vegas Sands Corp in Las Vegas, Nevada. We're the largest gaming company in the world by market cap. We have 3 simple points. Internet gambling takes gambling too far. We would like Congress to restore the Wire Act, and we implore Congress to shut down the illegal gaming sites that are out there today. Simply, a lot of people say it can't be done. Congress did it by shutting down 1,200 online pharmacies that were black market pharmacies. It can be done. It needs to be done. There are no provisions in place to do that. The thought of every single one of these becoming a casino should concern all of you. You go into states like Florida, where we're negotiating for an opportunity to spend $3 to $4 billion on an integrated resort, creating tens of thousands of jobs, and not a casino-centric mentality, which is what the industry has moved away from. But you have to negotiate each gaming position. Can you do 2,000 machines? Can you do 100 tables? And you have to figure out how you blend into the marketplace so you don't saturate the market, so you don't injure the existing infrastructure. So there's just not too much of it. And now, for whatever reason, they want to turn every single one of these into a casino with unlimited access, unlimited provisions. Congressman Terry, I'm pretty sure that I've known your family from the beginning. Your father delivered the news on Channel 7 when I was growing up, and I know that you and I probably never saw our parents' credit card, let alone did we touch it. But the world's changed. Children have 100% access to credit cards. They buy their apps with it. They buy their iTunes with it. And I don't want to speak to the integrity or the intelligence of anyone here on this committee and their ability to understand technology, but if they legalize it, it is going to be the kids that teach their parents how to get on. There is a point when it goes too far. Simply because we can doesn't mean we should. December of 2011 was not the day that the internet became safe. It's the day the Wire Act was overturned. And rather than my industry rushing to make the marketplace more safe, it has become a rush to the marketplace without any provisions. The internet, bots, net bots, all those things, Congresswoman, are more prevalent than ever. The internet is more dangerous than ever. But I have a lot of respect for Jeff Freeman and for the American Gaming Association, and I have tremendous respect for our competitors on the Strip. We just happen to disagree on this issue. But I also have a lot of respect for Frank Fahrenkopf, who was Jeff's predecessor. And I want to read a letter he put in Global Gaming Compliance of just February of 2012. Finally, it is important to remember what the DOJ decision really is. It is an opinion of the current Justice Department, not the law of the land as determined by the Supreme Court or any other court decision. The opinion is counter to that of 4 prior administrations that considered this matter. And when President Obama ultimately leaves office, the DOJ serves under the next president could reverse this opinion. Near the end of last year, I had the opportunity to testify on behalf of the commercial gaming industry before the U.S. House Committee on Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Commerce, Manufacturing, and Trade. I told Congress that without a federal framework on online gaming, there will be a patchwork quilt of rules and regulations that, while aimed at protecting consumers, could have the opposite effect by confusing customers and making it difficult for law enforcement to manage. I believe this still in the DOJ's opinion, and its implications reinforce my concerns. Members of the committee, the thought of a 50-state solution is scary. We are imploring on Congress to act, to restore the Wire Act, to conduct a study that shows that the internet can eventually be safe. But it's time to stop. Don't make a race to the bottom of the marketplace. Restore the Wire Act and protect American consumers. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Pappas, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Terry, Ranking Member Schakowsky and distinguished members of this committee, I'd like to thank you for holding this hearing and for allowing me to testify. I have the great honor of serving as the Executive Director of the Poker Players Alliance, an organization of 1.2 million American poker enthusiasts. Poker players are passionate about the freedom to play this game, and I have little doubt that every member of this subcommittee has heard from poker activists in their home states urging Congress to enact a sensible federal policy that licenses and regulates internet poker. It is my hope that the committee will respond by taking up legislation introduced by Congressman Joe Barton, H.R. 2666, the Internet Poker Freedom Act. The PPA stands in strong support of Congressman Barton's bill, and I congratulate the Chairman Emeritus for his leadership on this issue, and the poker player community thanks God that you are on our side. The Internet Poker Freedom Act focuses on corralling the current unregulated marketplace and turning it into a system that is safe for consumers and accountable to regulators and our government. The bill mandates technologies to protect consumers from fraud, eliminate underage access, and mitigate problem gambling. Mr. Barton's bill does not force any state to participate in the federal system, and it allows states to implement their own online gaming regulations. This is especially important given that 3 states, Nevada, Delaware, and New Jersey, have authorized and are regulating internet poker and internet gaming today. While the PPA would prefer the passage of a federal internet poker bill, we strongly support the rights of states to pursue internet gaming opportunities in the absence of a federal law. The adoption of regulated internet gaming in the U.S. means that policymakers can no longer consider regulated internet gaming as a theoretical. It is not a theory, it is reality, and it is here today. Not only can we reference the current U.S. regulated market, we also have the benefit of learning from Europe, where it has been regulated for more than 10 years. Of course, there are those who will advocate for a ban on internet poker and internet gaming. This misguided approach would only serve to harm the most vulnerable populations that regulation properly protects. I would like to take a moment to provide the subcommittee with information on how a combination of regulation and technology can meet these challenges. Due to time constraints, I urge you to review my submitted testimony for a more in-depth review of these facts. With respect to underage access, gaming site operators are required to implement state-of-the-art age verification software before being licensed and before accounts are opened and bets are settled. Failure to undertake rigorous age verification would result in the loss of a license and the closure of a business. While the U.S. market is still very new, it is notable that in Nevada, which began accepting internet poker play in April this year, there has not been a single reported incident of underage access. Another important matter is to ensure we are appropriately addressing problem gambling. Comprehensive research on the issue concludes that online gaming operators have effective and sophisticated tools to prevent and combat problem gaming. Most regulated online gaming markets require their licensees to employ these technologies to monitor their players and combat against problem gaming abuse. Finally, opponents of internet gaming have claimed that the activity is vulnerable to fraud and criminality. Let me say that prohibition will just play into the hands of the criminal element, just as it did in the 1920s when alcohol was banned. It is far better for the player's financial fate if their safety and security of their internet gaming transactions are in the hands of the U.S. banking system and responsible regulated American gaming corporations. Again, I ask that you refer to my submitted testimony for greater details on these issues, and I welcome the opportunity to discuss them further in the Q&A portion of this hearing. In closing, it might be useful to focus on the questions that are not before the committee right now. First, this committee is not deciding whether Americans will gamble on the internet. Millions of them do so today, and except in a few states where the activity is licensed, they are playing on offshore sites with uneven regulation at best. Second, the committee need not ask if internet gaming can be successfully regulated. It is successfully regulated today in European jurisdictions, and here in the U.S., online casino and poker games are regulated in 3 states, and online lottery and horse bets are successfully regulated in dozens more. The question before this committee is who, if anyone, will provide U.S. players with a safe and well-regulated place to play poker on the internet. We continue to urge Congress to enact the Barton Bill and thus accomplish this federally. At a minimum, we urge Congress to do nothing to prevent the states from licensing and regulating internet poker. Once again, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Brunel. You are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Les Burnell. I'm the National Director for Stop Predatory Gambling, and our mission is to end government sponsorship and promotion of gambling, and I appreciate the invitation to be here today. As you consider Internet gambling, I ask you to imagine yourself sitting down with your kids, your grandchildren, your nieces and nephews in front of a video game and encouraging them to put their money into it, to play it over and over again. But you knew they could never win, yet you kept encouraging them to do it. You would never do that. But for the last 40 years in American life, that's exactly what government has been doing by sponsoring and promoting casinos and state lotteries. The more citizens put their money into these games, the more money they're going to lose. Government, in this case, is not merely permitting private consensual behavior. This is a public policy. This is a government program that actively sponsors gambling and promotes it by granting monopolies and awarding regulatory advantages to favored firms. Government-sponsored gambling is a public policy that's failed. And it's failed because, one, it has transformed gambling from a private and local activity into the public voice of American government, such that ever-increasing appeals to gamble and ever-expanding opportunities to gamble now constitute the main ways that our government communicates with us on a daily basis. Government-sponsored gambling has also failed because it's failed to deliver on its promises to fund education, to lower taxes, to pay for needed public services. Just look at the evidence from your own states. But thirdly, most importantly of all, government-sponsored gambling has failed because it has contributed to patterns of inequality in America, increasing the divide in our country between the haves and the have-nots. Now, there are many forces currently contributing to the rise of inequality, such as globalization and technological change, that cannot be directly controlled by public policy. But government-sponsored gambling is a public policy, and it exists only because policymakers want it to exist. So whether it's Internet gambling or other forms of government-sponsored gambling, this is a public policy that's based on cheating and exploiting citizens. The best example is slot machines. The machine is mathematically designed that you will lose your money the longer you play it. It's up right from the get-go. The more you play, the more you lose. And the big money in Internet gambling is in online slots, which make up 65 to 80% of all gambling traffic. And you should know, in the brick-and-mortar casino business, 75% of that money they make is coming from slots. It's all about slot machines. And there are countless stories about how government-sponsored slots are cheating and exploiting citizens, but I'm going to share just one. In 2004, New York Times reporter Gary Rivlin toured the headquarters of International Gaming Technology, known as IGT. They're America's biggest maker of electronic slot machines, and today they've designed a leading platform for Internet gambling. Rivlin, the New York Times reporter, tells the story of his visit to the IGT building. Quote, most of the people I met inside IGT told me they never played slot machines on their own time. Even one corporate PR staff member couldn't resist shaking her head in disbelief as she described scenes of people lining up to play a new machine. Quote, it was unbelievable to me, she told me. And when I asked one IGT artist if he ever plays, he acted as if I insulted him. Slots are for losers, he spat, and then, coming to his senses, begged me to consider that an off-the-record comment. To a New York Times reporter, slots are for losers, he said, and many of these losers are your constituents. In government's partnership with gambling, there is one kind of loser who's the most lucrative of all, the problem gambler. We refer to these people as the expendable Americans, because everyone else is going to benefit from the public dollars that come in from people's gambling losses, but this money, we rented millions of Americans expendable, the addicts. Gambling operators spend millions of dollars on public relations and research to create the public impression they're not exploiting citizens. Yet despite all this money, there are two questions they never answer. And maybe we'll get that at this hearing today. The first one is, how much gambling revenue comes from problem gamblers? And the second question is, what percentage of gambling revenue comes from people who follow, quote, responsible gambling codes of conduct? We hear that a lot, responsible gambling. How much of their revenues come from people who actually practice that? So on the last page of my written testimony, there are 11 different studies 11 different independent studies that show 40 to 60% of their profits, gambling profits, come from problem gamblers. And that list was compiled as part of a recent report titled Why Casinos Matter, written by the Institute for American Values. So the second question is, gamblers who manage to follow responsible gambling codes of conduct, they contribute a mere 4% of gambling revenues. So in closing, government's partnership with gambling has failed. The evidence is all around us that it's been a failed experiment, and sponsoring internet gambling would be the biggest failure of them all. Just like we wouldn't encourage our own kids or grandchildren to put their money into a video game they would never win, it's time our government stopped cheating and exploiting our own citizens by sponsoring gambling.
Thank you. Dr. Volberg, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Terry, Ranking Member Schakowsky, and members of the subcommittee. I'd like to thank you for inviting me to testify this morning. My remarks today will focus on the likelihood of an increase in problem gambling in the wake of the introduction of online gambling, on possible changes in those most vulnerable to developing problems, and on additional measures that could be adopted to protect consumers and minimize harm. The bill before you, H.R. 2666, provides for federal oversight of states and tribes that would issue licenses for online poker. H.R. 266 includes several laudatory requirements for addressing problem gambling and responsible gambling, including provision for a federally managed self-exclusion program. H.R. 2666 requires states and tribes to adopt practices that the federal government recommends to protect consumers and amends the Public Health Service Act to give SAMHSA authority to address gambling addiction. While these are welcome improvements over an earlier version, I remain concerned that while H.R. 266 authorizes SAMHSA to establish and implement programs for the identification, prevention, and treatment of problem gambling, there is no specific mention of research or any provision to assure that research on online gambling and its impacts will be undertaken. There is substantial research internationally showing that problem gambling rates are 3 to 4 times higher among online gamblers compared to those who gamble but not online. It's quite likely that there will be an increase in problem gambling prevalence in the U.S. as online gambling participation increases and as inexperienced players encounter difficulties controlling their involvement. Although these new problem gamblers may eventually overcome the difficulties related to their gambling, most of the financial, psychological, social, work, school, and legal harms associated with problem gambling cannot be undone. Problem gambling is not distributed evenly throughout the population, and some groups are more vulnerable than others. Generally speaking, males, adolescents, some racial and ethnic groups, and people with low income and education have the highest rates of problem gambling. However, in some countries, rates of online gambling participation are higher among women and older adults compared with more traditional forms of gambling. And these new groups of gamblers may be particularly vulnerable to developing problems going forward. Understanding who is vulnerable has relevance to both gambling policy and the development of effective interventions. Beyond likely increases in prevalence, risk profiles may also change, and it will be important to be prepared to address the needs of new groups of problem gamblers as these emerge in an online environment. Constructing public policy and developing effective interventions requires empirical evidence, which in turn requires research. Internationally, research serves an increasingly critical role in informing gambling policy and regulation. However, the roughly $3 million that is spent annually on gambling research in the United States means that we know very little about how gambling in our country can be most safely provided. My own experience suggests that redressing this issue requires enshrining both consumer protection and the role of research in legislation that permits new forms of gambling. Most such legislation emphasizes revenue generation, and mention is rarely made of consumer protection. That's why I am particularly proud of the legislation that was passed 2 years ago in my home state of Massachusetts. The Expanded Gaming Act makes it clear that the intention of the statute is to provide the greatest possible economic benefits while reducing to the maximum the potentially negative consequences of introducing casino gambling to the Commonwealth. The effort to reduce negative consequences includes establishment of a public health trust fund from which 5% of the tax revenues generated annually by the 3 new casinos will be distributed for problem gambling research, prevention, and treatment. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Well, thank you, Dr. Volberg. Mr. Eggert, you are now recognized for your 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Madam Ranking Member and members of the committee. I appreciate you inviting me back. I was here 2 years ago at a similar, to testify similarly. I talk about consumer protection in gambling, and gambling is a consumer industry, which means that consumer protection should be hardwired into every aspect of its regulation. And so I'd like to talk about what I consider 3 very important aspects of consumer protection that should be considered in legalizing internet gambling. Number 1 is that gamblers should always be provided with all of the information that they need in order to make good decisions about whether, when, where, and how to gamble. They should be given the information they need to be good shoppers. It used to be that we looked down on gamblers and treated them as like lesser, almost evil people. And now they are just consumers. It's like buying a car. And if you're buying a car, you get to have information about gas mileage. In the same way, if you're buying gambling, you should get all the information you need. A crucial piece of information for slot machines is the hold percentage. Every slot machine is designed to have a specific hold percentage, which is the amount that the casino on average keeps of the bet, returning the rest in winnings. Why don't we get to know that every time we use a slot machine? That's basic information that every consumer should have anytime they play a slot machine, either on the internet or in land-based casinos. It's especially important for internet slots because you're not in a casino. You haven't picked the slot machine based on the staff or the ambiance or the floor shows. You're just sitting in front of your computer, and so if you're looking to decide where to play, the hold percentage of the slot machine should be paramount. And so any internet slot machine should tell you as you shop and as you gamble what hold percentage you're facing. The second rule of consumer protection in internet gambling concerns bots, poker bots. What these are consumer software programs designed to play poker, and I think it's important that players shouldn't lose money to poker bots that can play better than they can, unless they want to. If you choose to say, I want to go against the best bot in the world, then more power to you, but you should get to know that that's what you're doing. Now, there was a poker bot ring in Sweden in the last year that, as far as I can tell from the news, won like $1 million or more in just a couple months. If bots are strong enough and good enough to do that, they are a significant threat, and we have to address that problem. Bot makers are getting better all the time. There is a bot playing Limit Texas Hold'em that, according to the New York Times, can beat most people in the world. There is a new company that says they've designed a neural network bot that can play No Limit Texas Hold'em as well as most people. And so as computers get better, as neural networks get better, making bots is going to get easier and easier. And the day will come when some kid in their garage with a high-powered computer can make a bot that can defeat most human players. It will be a challenge to stop that. And if we can't stop that, we have to give players some defense so that they know if they're playing a bot or if they're playing somebody who plays abnormally well like a bot might. And so what I would recommend is we would have ratings for poker players so that you can tell when you're facing a much, much better player that may well be a bot. A third important aspect of consumer protection is giving players the power to self-exclude and to limit their play, either by the day, week, or month, by how long they play or how much they bet, and give them this kind of protection so that they can control their betting. It's a consumer industry. Consumers should be empowered to make good decisions, and so the industry should give them the tools they need to make good decisions. In my testimony, I talk a lot about what the different states have done and what Congressman Barton's bill has done, and I'd be happy to answer questions about that further. But again, I thank you for allowing me to testify.
Well, thank you for your return performance, sticking with kind of a show theme. Testimony, and now it's time to begin our questions. And my first one, because you're a law professor, I have to. I want to ask you this question.
Guilty as charged.
This is a DOJ opinion about the Wire Act. People tell me it's the law. Could you work us through, as quickly as you can as a law professor, is that the law?
Well, the law is what the courts and the people enforcing the law say it is to some extent. I think that I think it is a valid interpretation of the law. The DOJ's position, I think, is you can make a strong argument that it's the correct one. And so it isn't the law itself, but it's not a horrible misinterpretation of the law.
What happens if New Jersey or Nevada or Texas goes forward and there's a new administration next year, or I mean in a couple years, or there will be, and the DOJ goes back to the previous 4 administrations' interpretations of the Wire Act?
Then you would have an interesting battle between the states, which I think at that point would be loath to give up their flourishing internet industry. And they and the DOJ would have to fight it out in the courts. And ultimately, the courts would determine who was correct.
And that would be a ripe one for the Supreme Court to probably take up on a fast track.
I would think so. I would think so.
Yeah, legally, it's just very interesting. And as a former lawyer, those are the type of issues that kind of get my attention. But also as a father, they get my attention. And probably starting at about 8, my kids became pretty savvy shoppers with my credit card online. In fact, it's to the point where I just say, you go to the website and do it yourself.
Add to cart.
Add to cart, yes, on Dad's credit card, which they think is theirs. And so, in fact, they, at least for their lacrosse equipment, does that all the time. My card's already in there. And so they go get their new set of lacrosse gloves or pads or whatever. And then the next day I open up my email and see the receipt and then call them and say, what the heck did you do? But, Mr. Abood, and then to Mr. Pappas as well, how do we prevent the children who, as Mr. Abood said, and when you said that, it hit right at home, how do we really know if a minor's playing, if they're using Dad's credit card or Mom's, and how do we prevent that? Mr. Abood first.
Don't legalize it.
Okay. Mr. Pappas.
Shut down the illegal operators that are here, that are operating today. You can get into a long technological discussion about whether you can or can't prevent minors from getting involved, and I think some people believe you can, some people believe you can't. I've seen the technological demonstrations. I think they're a barrier to market. I think by the time someone has to go through all of that, they'll find that if you don't shut down the illegal sites, that's where they'll end up. But also when you speak to children, I think with respect to Congressman Barton, who I have tremendous respect for, and for Mr. Pappas to my left, I think their intentions about poker are very clear. But I don't think that's the intent of the legalization of online gaming. I think that the unclear nature of what the Wire Act means was hopefully Congress would take action. And I think that, using the poker analogy, for the industry to go state by state, particularly in Nevada, to try and scare Congress into acting was probably the worst bluff in the history of poker. In Nevada, almost shamefully, They rushed it through the legislature with an emergency declaration, passed unanimously by both houses. We need to pass this poker bill now. We need to set the precedent. It's just poker. It's just poker. It's just poker. 9 months later, it turns out it wasn't just poker. They have the ability, without the act of the legislature, to do full online gaming because it wasn't sustainable. Poker is not a sustainable market. It's fine if people want to play poker online. If it's safe, they can probably do it. But it's about this. It's about slot machines geared towards children, Marvel Comics, Iron Man, kiddie slots. You know, this stuff is not what we're about. It's not, that's where the industry is going to go. And unless you shut down those illegal sites, and unless we restore the Wire Act.
I want to save some time for Mr. Pappas on that. And by the way, when I got on one of my iPads, they did download an app for slots. I deleted it, but they weren't gambling, but it was just a regular app. Mr. Pappas.
I appreciate the opportunity to respond. I think it's important that we recognize that age verification technology exists not only in internet gaming, but in all forms of e-commerce that are age restricted. When you talked about your children buying lacrosse products, those aren't age restricted products. Therefore, there wasn't an age verification system in place for them to make that purchase. If a person wants to make a deposit on an internet gaming website, they would have to go through tremendous and rigorous levels in order to be able to make that deposit, proving that they are not only who they are, saying who they are, that this is John Pappas depositing, but that John Pappas is actually 21 years of age. And as I mentioned in my testimony, underage access in Nevada, where this has been going on since April, is zero. There has not been one reported incident of underage access in the state of Nevada. And further,
how do you know, though? That's one of the questions I have is how do you know, though?
Because regulators actively seek to try to get on the sites themselves, and if there was a parent or a child was able to access a site, and I would suspect if they lost money on that site, the parent would have to report that to the authorities, to the regulators, as well as to the credit agencies, and they would either get a refund for the money. None of that has been recorded. And if you look at the European experience, which has been going on for a decade, in 2011, the European Children's Charities Coalition on Internet Safety notified the European Commission that since 2007, they have not been made aware of a single instance where a child has beaten the system and gotten online to gamble. The fact is, age verification is here. It's working very effectively today. I welcome any way that we can improve it to ensure that children don't have access to these sites, because I think that's extremely important, but I will say that it's been working very effectively already.
Thank you. My time is up. Now the ranking member of the committee, you're recognized for 5 minutes for your questions.
Well, first of all, let me congratulate the panel. Every one of you, I found myself nodding as the arguments are compelling. But Mr. Abboud, you gave very passionate testimony, I think, but I know that I just want to mention this, that the Venetian Casino is owned and operated by Sands and Mr. Sheldon Adelson, and there's actually promotion of mobile casino wagering. A direct quote from the Venetian, quote, "Is there anything you can't do on a smartphone or tablet nowadays? Mobile casino gaming is available to you on property during your stay, and you can even play from your room." That's one quote. And the other is they also promote on their website a mobile sports betting app for smartphones, tablets, and PCs, and they tout that the app, quote, "allows you to wager anywhere in Nevada," which is not a far cry from anywhere in the United States. So I just want to say that, you know, there's a little, it feels to me a little hypocritical. But having said that, I wanted to ask about, Mr. Eggert, the consumer protections. Do you feel that it is possible to make sure that the consumer protections are built into legislation sufficiently to protect people from the potential abuses of online gambling?
I think that there are good consumer protection devices that can be built in. I'm not sure if you can ever have a perfect system. I think the problem of poker bots is going to be a difficult one. And I don't know that there is a good consumer protection solution to bots. But I think for slot machines, we can certainly have better protection than we have in almost any place in the country. Specifically, better information about hold percentages. And I think you can also design good methods for people to control their gambling that should be hardwired into it. So we can do a lot better, but I don't think you can have a perfect system.
I also wanted to ask about, again, who was it, Mr. Abu? They were talking about it's public policy. Were you the one that was talking about how now we've turned gambling into? No, that was you, Mr. Burnell. Well, here's the thing. We're sold, I was in the state legislature, we're often sold the lottery and other kinds of gambling revenue as helping our schools and in Illinois, supposedly for education. I know that for a time it really displaced money that would ordinarily go from the general revenue fund to education. I think that was corrected now in Illinois. But what is the history of that? And do these revenues, which are significant, actually help us to fund the needed priorities for our governments?
Sure. So without question, the answer to that is it has failed to produce revenues that they promised. You can't, no one can name a state in this country where, from Georgia to Washington State, where people have said, in Georgia, they're going to fund scholarships through their lottery. And in the end, what you see happening is low-income people losing money to pay for middle-class kids to go to college. And now that revenue hasn't sustained itself, so now they're going to turn to slot machines in Georgia.
So have there actually been studies that would show us? Do you have studies?
Yeah. The Rockefeller Institute in Albany, SUNY University up in Albany, has done a great study, more so than any other entity out there. Has done a great breakdown of how where the fact that gambling is not a sustainable revenue source from a governmental standpoint.
Okay, and Dr. Volberg, Mr. Burnell also cited some studies about the amount of revenue that comes from problem gamblers. Is there a way, do you think, that would actually work that could address that problem?
Yeah, the
Microphone.
The issue of the proportion of revenues that come from problem gamblers has been a contentious one. And Mr. Bernal's testimony lists quite a number of different studies that have been done. But the challenge is that the ratios are different in different jurisdictions. So the industry's approach to trying to address the issue of how much they depend on problem gamblers has been to try to expand the pool of people who gamble occasionally, so that you have less people who are problem or who are more people who are contributing to the pot, if you will. But I think in the end, the industry is going to be dependent to a significant degree on people who spend more than many of us think they should on their gambling involvement.
If I could just make one more comment. In Illinois, the lottery manager was just directed to expand the promotion beyond low-income people to people who have more revenue. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the full committee vice chair, Ms. Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as a point of, I think, just kind of a reality touch point to this hearing, Mr. Barton, who we all dearly love, got off on a little bit of a tangent when he did his opening statement this morning and said he thinks that God is in favor of his online poker bill because his flight got in early and, he thinks he had angel wings to help get him here. But I would encourage the gentleman from Texas to remember he only need look at the number of his bill to 666 to remember that the devil is in the details. So, just as a point of careful guidance and instruction.
At least you were listening to me.
Mr. Barton, I am always listening. We women do that very well. Ooh, yeah. Okay. Back to the questioning. Aren't you all glad you came? We're glad you came because I don't know if it is Mr. Eggert, the botnet that is out there spamming our Twitter accounts or what, but indeed they are very active. And we fully realize that. Some of you may be aware that Congressman Welch and I are co-chairs of a privacy working group. And Ms. Schakowsky is a part of this. And I have to tell you, it's a bipartisan group. It's a part of this committee. We are enjoying the education that we are getting on privacy issues and concerns from our constituents, and we're learning a lot. And one of the things that we have really taken note of is how incredibly complex the expectations of privacy are from constituents and from different participants in the industry. And we are seeking to work through this in our working group sessions. So, Mr. Freeman and Mr. Pappas, I want to come to you. And I just very simply, and Mr. Freeman, let's start with you. What are the expectations a consumer will have of privacy for their participation and their information if they log onto one of the sites? First you, and Mr. Pappas, if you will follow him.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I think many were expecting Andy and I to have the fireworks today, so I'm thrilled to see you and Mr. Barton taking the stage. When it comes to privacy, that's obviously an area that we value significantly. Consumer protection, a topic that's been a primary issue here today, should be an issue, and it's an issue we believe in very passionately. The only way to address privacy, the only way to address consumer protection is through effective regulation. The black market is the one area where these issues won't be addressed. With online gaming, all of this is voluntary. People are going on, they're providing the information themselves, they're choosing to enter that information in there, and through the regulatory bodies, the protection of that information is assured. That's what makes this situation unique in that sense, that one, people are choosing to do this in a voluntary manner, and two, the regulators are assuring that this information is protected.
Okay.
First, let me start by saying that the messages you've been receiving via Twitter and Facebook, I assure you, are from real people who live and reside in your district and care passionately about their right to play online. Secondly, the issues of privacy and data security for internet gaming are no different than they would be for any other e-commerce company, be it Amazon or Facebook. We believe that licensed entities would have to require all of the same privacy and data security laws that every other American company must apply. Today, we have a situation where American consumers, except for those in those 3 states where it is authorized, are playing on offshore sites, and they are not subject to any U.S. law or regulation. So we're asking for a federal law or state laws that ensure that the players, the sites are authorized, regulated, and that those sites are adhering to all the strong data privacy laws that this Congress or states come up with.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I've got 2 other questions I'm going to submit because of time. One, it pertains to Mr. Aboud's testimony and the November 13th FBI Crimes Division letter. And then the other pertains to the 2009 British hacker Ashley Mitchell when he was posing as an administrator for Zynga poker games. With that, I yield back.
Thank you. Now recognized for 5 minutes, gentleman from Vermont.
Thank you very much. Folks are going to gamble. They like to do it. In any way they can, they will. And there obviously are legitimate reasons, and then there's some folks that get overwhelmed by it, just like with any other kind of activity. So anything that we do has to include some protections. You've been trying to do that in Las Vegas, as I understand it. But I want to direct these questions to Professor Volberg and Professor Eggert. How do we ensure that minimizing the harm is baked in as a priority from the start and not simply laid on afterwards, after the fact and the harm is done? I mean, if we get at it in the beginning with some sensible plan, that has, in my view, more prospect for being successful and helping more people. Could you?
I think that the way you do that is you plan it before you legalize the internet gambling. It should be something that should be written into the regulations from day one. I think there's a lot of room, I'm with Dr. Volberg on this, a lot of room for research to see what helps with problem gamblers. But as far as consumer protection, it's pretty straightforward what information people need and want in order to gamble, and they should be provided that. One of my concerns about the state-by-state approach is that I'm worried that it'll be a race to the bottom with states with weak protections will win out over states with stronger protections, and any federal program has to take that into account and prevent it from happening.
Okay, Dr. Volberg?
I guess I would echo Professor Eggert's remarks. I think you do have to start even before the regulations. You have to bake the language into the legislation that says this is not just about raising revenues or paying for other programs. This is about consumer protection and making sure that what we put in place is going to work.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Freeman and Mr. Pappas, you're advocates for this. What are your views on having, as part of any authorization, consumer protections, and B, some help to problem gamblers? And start with you, Mr. Freeman. Go ahead.
It's not often an industry comes before you asking for regulation. That is what the gaming industry is doing today, asking for some very specific points around age verification, around consumer protection, around education, and around the issues of responsible gaming. Mm-hmm. The way to do that is obviously through regulation. And to the previous point that was made, the way our industry behaves, being regulated in Nevada and Mississippi and countless states around the country, we are actually held to the highest standard, because any state in which we do business can punish us for what we do in another market. So we actually have a race to the top in that sense, and it's worked for an extended period of time for our industry.
All right, Mr. Pappas?
Most definitely. I mean, I represent a consumer-driven organization, so consumer protections are paramount to our concern, and that's why we believe a regulated market is going to far better protect consumers than a prohibition or even the status quo. So we believe that regulation, that lawmakers should require that regulators implement best-of-breed technologies, and that it gives the companies the flexibility to innovate and beat all of the potential problems that have been raised. And I think that is the best way to proceed, with lawmakers setting the standards, regulators enforcing those standards, and companies innovating and making them even better.
Okay. Mr. Abboud, you raised some legitimate concerns. I think they're on the minds, obviously, of lawmakers in the states and also here. I mean, is it your view that there really are no protections that could be part of any authorizing legislation that would get the job done, so it's better not to do it at all?
Well, as I said, when the Wire Act was overturned, that's not the day that the Internet became safe. And it's an issue that we study. It's an issue that we study every day. But we don't feel that the technology there is to safeguard consumers to the extent.
Well, let me ask this. If the technology were there, then would you have a different point of view?
I don't think this is a market that we would ever go into. We just think that turning every device into a casino takes gambling too far.
So what would be the proper limit, as you see it?
None. This country we talked about the European model. We have something in the United States that they don't have. Billions and billions of dollars of brick and mortar casinos that generate jobs, that generate a lot of livelihoods for a lot of people across the country, based on shows, conventions, trade shows, all those types of things. Europe doesn't have that. Simply because Europe stepped forward and pandered to the lowest common denominator is not something our industry should follow.
Okay, thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. Now recognize the Vice Chairman of the subcommittee, Mr. Lance, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I think this is a very important panel, and I respect everyone who is on the panel. I hope to participate in the hearing for its full length. I do have a health subcommittee as well, but I certainly am deeply interested in the views of everyone on the panel. To Mr. Pappas, you've stated in your testimony that the bill does not force any state to participate in an interstate internet poker system, and equally as important, it allows states to implement their own online gaming regulations. As you are aware, New Jersey has begun internet gambling. Would this legislation, in your view, in any way preempt what New Jersey is currently doing?
Mr. Barton's bill, H.R. 2066, would not in any way restrict the ability of Nevada or any other state to provide.
I think your microphone's off.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. Mr. Barton's bill would not restrict in any way the ability of New Jersey or any other state to provide house-banked casino games, lottery tickets, or any other games other than poker. However, with poker, it would require that the state would have to become an authorized federal body, authorized by the federal government to continue to do that. Given that New Jersey is known for being one of the most robust gaming regulations in the country,
heavily regulated.
And heavily regulated, that they would easily meet, if not exceed, whatever standards the federal government sets aside.
Thank you. And then to Mr. Freeman and Mr. Aboud, regarding the DOJ opinion as it concerns the Wire Act, is it the view of both of you, I know you reach a different conclusion ultimately, but is it the view of both of you that there needs to be statutory legislation in this regard as opposed merely to an opinion from the current DOJ? First Mr. Freeman and then Mr. Aboud.
It's our opinion that the online gaming environment would be better with Congress putting in place some minimum thresholds in the areas that I discussed, of age verification, of geolocation, and others. Without that, states are moving forward. They're putting in place, as your state is doing, very comprehensive regulations. And I think they're showing an ability to regulate this market effectively.
Thank you. Mr. Aboud.
Well, as I stated previously, we think that the Wire Act being overturned can be overturned at any moment by any administration. The states that are going forward are doing so with great risk, as are my fellow industry members are going forward with great risk. So that is why I'm here today asking for the Wire Act to be restored so that we can take away that ambiguity.
And you would restore it in such a way that this would not be permitted?
Correct.
And Mr. Freeman, you would modify it to permit it with certain federal regulations?
Again, putting in place those minimum standards. In the absence of that, or even with the changes that are recommended, people are going to continue to game. As we mentioned before, in 2012, nearly $3 billion was spent. Fixing the Wire Act does nothing to change the desire that's been referenced.
I tend to agree with that, and certainly I believe in New Jersey we have tried to be responsible, and let me repeat that I believe that New Jersey regulation is strict, and we have had a generation of experience in this regard. But I certainly respect both of your points of view on this issue. Mr. Pappas, regarding Congressman Barton's legislation, would it in any way prevent New Jersey from offering games of chance such as blackjack or slots?
No, sir. It would not restrict the ability for any house-banked games. Poker would be the only place where New Jersey would have to consult with the federal law.
And from your perspective, that consultation would be relatively easy and seamless, and it's likely that New Jersey could continue to do what it is currently doing.
That would be our hope. As an organization, we fought very hard for the New Jersey law, and we support that law. We also support Mr. Barton's law, and we hope that they can work together.
Thank you. Let me say that from my perspective, the governor of New Jersey, my close friend Governor Christie, and the legislature in New Jersey, and those who administer our laws in New Jersey try to work in a comprehensive fashion, and we try to work with all of those who are interested in this issue, including all of those on this panel. And I want to thank the panel. And Mr. Aboud, you certainly represent a very great corporation in this country, SANS, and I deeply respect that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Lance. And now the Chairman Emeritus for the full committee, Mr. Joe Barton. You are recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me start out. I was being somewhat flippant when I talked about God being for this bill. Obviously, God doesn't care a fig one way or the other about our bill. But I will say, as a practicing Christian, that God does give men and women free will, and I think we ought to have a law that reflects free will in this issue. I did not say in my opening statement, but we do have some representatives of the Indian casinos and the Indian Gaming Association in the room, and they were invited to present testimony and to be a part of the panel. And it was a voluntary basis that they were invited, and they chose not to. But obviously, Indian gaming is a huge part of this issue, since almost as much and perhaps more people play in Indian casinos than in non-Indian casinos. Mr. Freeman, in your testimony, you gave a list of things that you said federal legislation should include or accomplish. In listening to you, I believe that my bill, H.R. 2666, hits all those points. Do you agree with that?
Mr. Barton, your bill certainly hits those points and others. There are points we'd certainly like to see added to that, and happy to discuss those with you.
Okay. And Mr. Abood, I'm glad that you're here and you represent the Sands Corporation. The first hotel casino that I stayed in as a young man when I went to Las Vegas for the first time was the Old Sands. And just last year, I held a political fundraising event at the Venetian, which I believe is a property of the current Sands Corporation. And so I have great respect for the company that you represent. Mrs. Schakowsky pointed out in her questioning some advertising material. I'd like to put that up on the board, up on the screen, that Cantor Gaming, which is a vendor of Sands and does the Venetian, has on that particular slide right there, is there anything you can't do on a smartphone or tablet nowadays? Mobile casino gaming is available to you on property during your stay. You can even play from your room. And then the next one, which is again at the Venetian, it talks about their sports book, that you can wager from anywhere in Nevada. Now, I want to be fair on the first slide about the gaming. It does not allow you to play poker from your room for some reason. You can do slots or roulette or Wheel of Fortune or whatever, but I'd like to hear your comments on this, because what you're advertising here, as Ms. Schakowsky pointed out, is the same thing that we're talking about in my bill for poker only. It's just a matter of how wide the geography is, or the wireless connection.
Well, that's why we're here today, and I appreciate the opportunity to respond to what Congressman Schakowsky said, because it's all about human interaction, right? Congressman, all of you, have the right to eyeball me and determine whether or not I'm telling the truth, and you can hold me accountable. Doesn't happen with a lot of online gaming opportunities, does it? And it's also about the location. That is a very controlled environment. In a regulated state, in a regulated casino, that can only be done within the four walls of our building. You have to go up to Congressman Terry if he works at the Cage, fill out the application, have an eyeball-to-eyeball experience. Make sure you are on the self-exclusion list. Make sure that we don't think you've had too much to drink. A whole
But
series.
I don't want you to filibuster the last 30 seconds. What your company is advertising here, except for the geography, is the same thing that my bill does. And my bill is poker only. Poker only. Now, I've never met a professional roulette player I've never met a professional slots player. But there are lots of professional poker players because it is a game of skill. Now, if we're the final table here, Mr. Long, myself, Mr. Harper, Mr. Terry, Ms. Schakowsky, I've got a high probability I can tell you which one of us comes out the winner at the final table. Because I've played with Billy Long, and I think he probably beats me. Now, I've never played with Jan, so I don't know. She may be a sleeper. But, but poker is a game of skill. And all my bill does is allow free will at the state level, if the governor allows it, for people who want to play poker online. And I, again, appreciate Mr. Terry for his holding this hearing, and I'm going to stay and hear the other questions. And maybe, if given an opportunity, I'd like a second round for myself, if that's
Jan and I will discuss.
acceptable.
Gentlelady from Illinois and I will discuss that. Mr. Harper, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank each of you for being here on what is a very important topic and one that is created a little bit of a division. Okay, quite a divide. But we have, of course, legal gambling in the state of Mississippi. It's a big industry. On average, about $2.2 billion worth of revenue a year are spent on gambling in Mississippi, versus maybe what, $10 billion a year on average in Nevada, perhaps. But it is a tourism-driven business. The brick and mortar issues very important there, and it is a destination, so that what you see is not just a casino, but you see restaurants, golf courses, water parks, other things that are there that draw that. This brings none of that, and my concern, I guess my overriding concern I have is if we address this issue and we do what Mr. Barton proposes or what others may propose, is how are we doing anything to address what is the underlying problem or the background problem of offshore and out-of-country illegal sites? We're not addressing that. And certainly if we restore the Wire Act and give it some teeth, perhaps we can do it. But it would seem to me that this bill, the problem that I have, one of the problems I have with it, is if we allow states to, we make it legal and then states can opt out. It would seem to me if you were going to go that route, the better thing would be to make it illegal and let the state legislatures opt in. It at least might give some better safeguards. Not that I'm proposing that, but I'm just saying versus what we're seeing here. So my concern, I guess, is, and I'll start with you if I can, Mr. Abood, what, in your view, would it take for the United States to be able to efficiently and effectively regulate internet gambling and control the offshore illegal sites? Do we have the ability to do that if we were to have the will to do that?
Thank you, Congressman. I think that we do. Government is doing with online pharmacies today. They shut down 1,200 illegal online pharmacies. So it can be done. To say that we can't do it is not a plausible answer. And I think when it comes to the safety of the industry and the integrity of it, it's the FBI that has testified before Congress and sent letters saying that there's no guarantees that you can prevent youth from gambling. And with all due respect to Congressman Barton, I'm a big fan of his. When you all are playing poker together around a table, you can't show each other your cards. You can't collude against each other because it's human interaction. I don't know what happens online. No one's proven to me that you can't collude against each other. This is in its infancy, And it is a rush to market, as I said before, because the Wire Act was overturned. That is not the day the internet became safe. It's not a safe place for a lot of different transactions. And I said before, this is a play to the youth of America, and this is going to be our Joe Camel moment. And if we do not behave responsibly, and protect ourselves against what could prey on youth and other people, it could very well be the demise of our industry. And to go forward would be irresponsible.
Wouldn't it seem that the best place to start then is let's go ahead and do everything we can within our power from a technological standpoint to shut down the illegal sites?
Absolutely. And there's not been enough discussion about that. I think that everyone on this panel is in agreement to shut down the illegal sites. And it is essential. If that is all that came out of this whole process, we would all be a lot better off. But we haven't done anything. And the industry, including my company, and everyone on this panel, and including the no casino people, have not done enough to push for that effort.
And if you don't address that, of course, if you make it legal across the board, and there's going to be additional regulatory burden and responsibilities and cost, which would be something that the players would incur, would that not then naturally drive them to the cheaper site in their views?
Well, I think
if you haven't stopped the offshore illegal sites.
Thank you. I think if it was to be legalized today, and we don't shut off the illegal operators, I think that the industry as it exists today is at an unfair advantage because they will be operating in the regulated environment. There is nothing that is going to prevent the illegal operator from what we call giving away the market, giving away the house, adding more incentives, making it easier to get online. They will go down to the bottom, and it'll be easier to go to the illegal sites unless we shut them down, unless it's a complete uniform shutdown of Internet gaming.
Thank each of you for being here. My time's expired. Yield.
Thank you. And now the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Johnson, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I believe strongly that states' rights plays a predominant role in the decisions that we'll make about gaming. I think the state governors, the legislatures, the people of the states are much more in a better position to be able to decide what they want than regulators here in Washington, D.C. But I also understand, being an IT geek myself, that the Internet has opened the door to a different kind of technology that has to be looked at and evaluated. Mr. Freeman, let's start with you. The AGA has changed its position on Internet gaming over the years. What is its current position on Internet poker and online gaming? Do you want a federal law, or do you want the states to be in charge of that?
Yeah, the AGA's position was adopted in 2010, and that's the current position of the organization. We support a federal government role here in regulating this. We support a poker solution at the federal level, and we support the ability of states to opt in as to whether or not they choose to want to offer that game. In the absence of federal action, states have moved forward with this. We've begun to see states like New Jersey do this in a very effective manner, along with Nevada and Delaware. And it's true, the industry is increasingly interested in what New Jersey is doing because they're proving they can do it effectively. And that's of great interest to us.
Yeah. You know, my concern from a technological perspective is to say we're going to regulate it is one thing. To do it effectively and protect the innocent. You know, I do believe that gambling is an enticement to some who would see a potential quick fix to a financial problem. I understand that. I also understand, though, that we don't outlaw prescription drugs because some people fall victim to addictions to prescription drugs. It's all about the choice, and I firmly believe that the American people have the ability to make those kinds of decisions. My concern is how the technology, how protections would be put in place to protect minors, to protect children, to protect the situation that our chairman talked about, where his kid uses his credit card and goes out and gambles a couple $100,000 away without him knowing about it, because we know today that minors, young people, others that should not get to certain restricted adult sites and other sites are able to do so because again, being an IT geek myself, I know that there is no perfect security. So how do you, those of you that are proponents, you can just sound off one at a time if you want to. How do you propose to make sure that our innocent young people aren't the ones, and maybe people like my chairman who wind up with a couple of $100,000 gambling debt that he didn't know was going to be on his credit card to fall victim?
If I can respond first, and thank you for the question. I think it's very important that we look at these issues and that we see how regulation can solve them. Again, we're not talking about a theoretical, can this be regulated? This is being regulated today in 3 states, and it has been regulated in European jurisdictions for over 10 years. 10 years. This is not in its infancy. This is a mature industry that has dealt with these issues for over a decade and responded to them accordingly. With respect to underage access, I've already mentioned to you that there has not been a single reported incident of underage access because of this tight age verification technologies that are available. It's not simply going on and clicking here, I am 18 or I am 21, let me gamble. You have to go through multi-layer age verification to not only prove that you are who you say you are, but that you are of the approved age. So it's certainly not like any other form of e-commerce that is not age restricted. This is very restrictive. In terms of problem gambling, there's very specific ways to address it. And I would argue, and this may blow people's mind, I would argue that it's easier to protect problem gamblers online than it is in the brick and mortar casino. I can walk into the Venetian tomorrow with $1,000 in my pocket, play roulette, play craps, and play poker, and walk out, and not a single person knows I was in the casino and I lost $1,000. Online, that is impossible. They know every moment you're on the site. They know every game you're playing, every wager you're making, every win you're making, every loss you're making. It's tracked and recorded in real time, and regulators recognize that that wealth of data is gold in terms of properly regulating it and ensuring that it's not abused.
I appreciate your passion, and my time has run out. I would simply point out we've got a prime example with healthcare.gov. Regulated does not necessarily equal secure.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. At this time, recognize Mr. Long from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Johnson, with your comments about the chairman, I'm going to miss you on this subcommittee.
And by
I want one of those
before,
credit cards where you can get $100,000 on there, whatever that is.
Clarify for the record, that was not gambling. You was buying lacrosse stuff and iTunes.
Oh, Mr. Abood, got a question for you. Unfortunately, during these hearings, we cannot go back and pull the transcript immediately, so I thought I heard you saying, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you were talking to Mr. Terry early on, in fact, I think he did the first questioning after you all gave your openings, I thought I understand you to say that you're okay if poker is legalized on the internet as long as it's not expanded to include all forms of gambling.
No. We are, for the record, we're opposed to all forms of internet gaming.
Okay, I'll have to go back and listen to that because that's what I thought I heard. Mr. Eggert, as far as these poker bots are concerned, these are computer programs that they operate how? Is this the people running the site has someone playing against you, or is this someone in their apartment that hooks up to a computer and acts like they're a living, breathing person playing a living, breathing person in another state or another country, or how do they work?
They can be both types. There have been poker sites that have used bots to stimulate games so that there are more people to sit down at a game.
Kind of like a shill in a casino then.
Right.
Okay.
And that, there they should be telling people it's a bot, but they haven't always done that. But the bots that are most concerned are not from the site, are ones that people have designed. They're running on their home computers, so it looks like they're playing, but actually the decisions they're making, whether to bet or raise or fold, are being made by the computer software and not by a human.
Okay. And Mr. Freeman, for you, a few years ago, I think back 10 years ago, there was a guy whose name was Moneymaker, believe it or not, that won the World Series of Poker, which he'd gotten in on what they call a satellite. He'd paid $40 or something to play a tournament, ended up winning $6-7 million, whatever it was. So that kind of really put jet fuel into the whole internet poker thing, which it thrived for several years until the Black Friday shutdown, but during the course of that, there were some very high-profile cheating scandals where the operators of these sites were actually looking at your cards, at the other people they were playing's cards, and with the skill of the poker players, they realized after a fashion, and I think 60 Minutes did a special on that, how, if this legislation goes through, how can people be assured that that type of activity does not continue or starts in again, I guess?
Yeah, Congressman, I think you speak to exactly the market we all want to prevent. In those days, with companies based in Costa Rica and elsewhere around the world, where we didn't have the protections, we didn't have the regulations built in, there were a lot of scary things that took place. What we're talking about is a regulated environment with licensed companies. You know, there's a real reason that licensed companies don't want to see underage people online. There's a real reason licensed companies don't want to see cheating take place. And it's because they can lose their license, not just of their online facility, but their brick and mortar facility, in which it's already been mentioned, they've invested billions of dollars. You have a moral and a business incentive for the industry to do this in the most proper, regulated, and effective manner, and that's what will assure, rather than the black market, that's what will assure that consumers are protected.
And I know with your American Gaming Association that you represent several members that I assume they all have brick and mortar facilities, do they not?
Everyone within our association on the operator side has a brick and mortar facility. We also have all the leading manufacturers in the industry as well.
And I know you can't see into the future, but as your best guess, if this legislation did pass and people were authorized to open up online poker-only casinos, let's say, do you visualize that being a MGM, a Caesars, a Sands, a Wynn? Will it be the big operators that are out there now in the brick and mortar marketplaces, or will it be smaller operators?
Yeah, I think that goes back to Congressman Harper's point before. How do we protect the brick and mortar investments that have taken place in Mississippi and Missouri and elsewhere? You already have these facilities standing. How do we make sure that they thrive? We allow them to tap into the new market. If we don't allow them to tap into the new market, we can assure that they go the way of Borders and Blockbuster and others if they can't adapt, if they can't keep up with innovation.
Yeah, but my question is, do you think they will be the only ones that would?
I think it's up to states to determine how they want to structure this. In New Jersey, they've structured it in such a way where the brick and mortar facilities are the only ones that can offer.
One quick question, so I don't have time to go to someone else, so I'll ask you. Nevada apparently has online poker now. New Jersey's going for it, and Delaware, I believe, are the three. But let's say that they all three had it tomorrow. Now, can those people in Nevada own? Do you have to be a resident of those states, number one, to play when you're physically in those states? And can you play if you're in Nevada and New Jersey has it now? Let's say, could someone in Nevada play against someone in New Jersey, or does New Jersey people all playing against Jersey people and Nevada against Nevada?
The gentleman's time is over, but I'll give you 10 seconds to order.
So
or
2 points.
to answer.
One, you don't have to be a resident of the state. You have to be within the boundaries of the state as identified by geolocation companies, number one. Number two, on your point about can these states work together, they probably can. They have not reached agreements to date, but that option is there for New Jersey, Delaware, and Nevada to begin to work together.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, and that concludes the time for questions. I do have a unanimous consent request to include the following items for the record. One, statement of the National Indian Gaming Association. Number two, statement of the Lyle Beckwith on behalf of the National Association of Convenience Stores. Number three, statement of Mr. Is that Thaxton, independent software engineer. Number four, exchange of correspondence between the late Mr. C.W. Bill Young of Florida and the FBI. Hearing no objections, so ordered. And the next item of business is that we as the members, have the right to submit questions to you, written questions. We'll hopefully have those done within the next couple weeks. And I would appreciate about 14 business days. We don't hold you to an exact standard, but appreciate if you get written questions from the members from this committee that you, within about 14 days, have them back to us. Would appreciate that. And just want to thank all of our witnesses for being here. This was a good discussion. Sometimes we made it a little light, but this is an extremely important issue. One, I will make this comment. When Mr. Barton first introduced this bill, a lot of us thought it was pretty way out there. But with this decision by the Justice Department, it makes it a very relevant question and one that we have to deal with.
Would the gentleman yield on that?
Absolutely.
Well, my first bill that I introduced in this committee was to repeal the Natural Gas Policy Act of wellhead pricing on natural gas, and that was at that time way out there because John Dingell was chairman.
Good point.
That happened. About 5 or 6 years ago, I started an effort and held a hearing on the BCS, and everybody thought that was crazy. Well, thankfully, this is the last year of the BCS, and we are going to a modified playoff. So, Mr. Chairman, the time is coming for this bill.
We've always thought of you on the cutting edge.
So time is on our side. Thank you,
So-
Mr. Chairman, for holding the hearing.
Well, thank you. And so again, thank all of our witnesses. We are adjourned.